only in New York. Brought to you by Optimum by Altice.
If this is America, the home of the brave, don't you think it's about time some of us start acting brave?
10-10 shots fired, City Hall building.
We need police right now.
All 5 boroughs are dying. This is Crack City.
A real-life soap opera has kept New Yorkers glued to their TV sets.
It was a really hot day. There were many, many people on the floor and in the balcony, which hangs over part of the city council room, and I was under it. So all of a sudden we heard pop, pop.
Be advised, we're getting a report. We got 10-10 shots fired, City Hall building.
When we heard that there were gunshots inside City Hall, inside the council chambers, I mean, our jaws dropped.
Be advised, the City Hall building or by the park, we got a possible person shot.
I heard 2 shots. I used to be a police officer. I know what shots sound like, so I immediately went under my desk.
Christine Quinn, at that point, was a council member. She said she hit the floor.
Someone screamed, hit the deck, and people started hitting the floor, and then someone said, Chris, get down. I was kind of frozen, and so I just fell to the floor and then crawled under my desk and waited there.
And then we see all this footage coming back, and there's chaos on the steps of City Hall.
I saw City Hall completely surrounded by police. All the surrounding streets were shut down. The subway system underneath City Hall shut down. The Brooklyn Bridge shut down.
I had never seen anything like this in my life, in my career.
It was a harrowing ordeal that seemed almost surreal.
They cut into programming and said shots fired inside City Hall, Councilman dead.
Brooklyn Councilman James Davis, a former police officer, died from 2 gunshots to the chest.
I'm stuck in traffic, and I turn on the radio, and then they say James E. Davis was fatally shot.
In the aftermath of the shooting at City Hall, family members rushed to a nearby hospital. Davis, shot in the chest, died shortly after he arrived.
How does this happen? How does someone get a gun inside City Hall? How does someone fatally shoot a council member?
How could this have happened in City Hall? Somebody tell me that.
Jeffrey, who did it?
Was it a coincidence?
Jeffrey, who did it?
I don't know who did it. The system did it.
In the United States of America, if they can't beat you in the polling booth because you're that popular, it is not unheard of for a politician to get assassinated.
He was for our people. He was definitely for jobs and development and so much going on. I am just so heartbroken.
I thought this guy was going to be the next black mayor. I thought this guy going to be the senator. And they had to scrub his blood off the stairs of City Hall.
It seemed strange. Weapons being used at the largest city in America and my own hometown, and a victim being a friend of mine.
Like he tried to stop them from scrubbing the blood off of staircases in Bed-Stuy and Brownsville. That's what he fought all his life.
The irony of this tragedy is that he's a person that committed his entire life as a police officer, as a correctional officer, and as a city council person to stopping violence was a victim of violence.
There are still several parts of the narrative that the sentences are missing.
Police tonight are trying to establish the motive for the fatal shooting of City Councilman James Davis of Brooklyn.
And there was a larger story there. A story of rivalry that was personal as well as political. And that probably didn't get covered as much as it should have.
They lit candles to remember a man residents called the light of this Brooklyn community, a Prince of Peace.
This shows the work that my brother's been doing over the years. 4,000 people, and they're staying around, and I'm so appreciative.
He was in the community. He understood the community, and he spoke for the community. You know, because he was really Brooklyn all the way.
In the Crown Heights neighborhood that elected him on the streets, he was determined to clean up. He's being remembered as a unifier.
You know, they watched him, grow into this political figure who represented them, and he gave them the impression that he was never going to forget from whence he came.
People in this community already vowing to continue the causes he supported.
James' fight was dealing with anti-violence, and there was so many shootings, particularly in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, where James grew up and was a part of.
There are numerous people that are walking around this community, Hasidics, with bullets in them.
As children growing up in Crown Heights, it was a very diverse community, a Hasidic community, African American.
This is Crown Heights, stately homes, neatly kept apartment buildings where blacks and Jews live and shop in harmony. But there is a history of friction that runs long and deep.
There was this increasing division between the Orthodox Jewish community and the black community.
It is a fragile balance of people reluctant to learn how each other lives and thinks.
The community started looking at it like the Jews are getting more than the blacks.
Blacks say police show favoritism towards the Hasidic community.
There has to be one standard for whites and blacks.
The resentment there was the perception that the Orthodox Jewish community was getting a lot of favoritism and they could race through the streets with their cars and have lights and sirens and not pay attention to little kids on the street.
Last night, a station wagon careening off President Street hit two 7-year-old boys, killing Gavin Cato.
Gavin Cato was a young black boy of Guyanese descent who was struck by a vehicle driven by an Orthodox Jewish man, and resentment grew from there.
The SADC ambulance arrived and took the drivers and left the kids there.
So when that little boy got hit on his bicycle and then the driver was hustled off, that sort of set the wheels in motion to have the problems in Crown Heights.
Within minutes, members of the black and Hasidic community were throwing rocks and bottles at each other.
Looking back, you could see that an incident like that was almost guaranteed to set things off.
A shot was fired eventually at the police. They were trying to intervene, and then a stabbing.
And then during that time is when Yankel Rosenbaum was stabbed.
29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum, a member of the Hasidic community, eventually died of stab wounds at Kings County Hospital.
He was killed right in front of our door, right there in Crown Heights.
Mourners carried the coffin of 29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum to the 71st precinct where they called for more police protection.
And that situation eventually mushroomed.
This is just about as ugly as it gets. Ethnic and racial differences exploding into violence on the street.
The two communities screaming and yelling at each other, the total complete separation. James said, I have to do something. I have to do something myself. We have to get involved.
Since this violence is not going to be tolerated, we pray that you would comfort this community, oh God.
He was in the middle of the whole Crown Heights fiasco, and sort of that motivated him to become a politician at some point.
You will be held accountable for foolish, inappropriate, unacceptable behavior.
James's rise to political notability had to do with his move to the anti-violence movement.
Violence must stop in our streets.
He said, we're gonna start an organization called Love Yourself, Stop the Violence. And we're gonna bring the entire community together.
Love yourself. Love yourself. Stop the violence.
Love yourself, stop the violence. That quote still resonates in the Crown Heights community.
I love you guys, and it's always, it was just about love, and he lived his life for love and he died because of that.
I just gotta tell y'all about a man that I met some time ago. He's not an ordinary man, he's an extraordinary man, also born and raised in Brooklyn. The most sincere individual I've ever met when it comes to love for his people.
I thought that James Davis was very exciting, very charismatic, and was the kind of political figure that could win white and black votes.
A dynamic speaker and motivator, a leader and the ultimate role model for our children.
Because he became known for Stop the Violence, things that could be appealing to all communities.
A community activist to the highest degree, and an inspiration to me, and I'm sure he will also be an inspiration to you.
Oftentimes people romanticize the loss of someone, and all of a sudden you try to create a great narrative, how great they were. You don't need a creative writing course to write out the life that he lived.
The man of the hour, Mr. James E. Davis. Y'all support him.
The entire community began to embrace him. Who is this James Davis? What is this guy? Who is this kid?
As the Brooklyn community gathers to pay its respects, let's take a closer look at who James Davis was.
I first met him at an anti-violence rally in Brooklyn. I believe he had his own organization, Love Yourself, Stop the Violence.
In 1991, he developed a not-for-profit organization, Love Yourself, Stop the Violence, dedicated to getting kids off of the streets.
He's starting this movement to stop the violence, and then he gets involved in law enforcement.
Back in 1989, Davis joined the Department of Corrections.
My father was a correction officer, so my father wanted us to walk in his steps as a correction officer. In that time period, my brother was getting in my mother's car.
17 years ago, standing right there, I came out my mother's house to move my mother's car.
And the police came and surrounded him, thinking that the car was stolen.
2 NYPD police officers put guns at my head, put me in handcuffs, slammed my head down on the back of the car.
Roughed him up pretty bad, and he was embarrassed because he was this young preacher in the community, and now he's getting pushed around and pulled around. And then he said, from that moment, he said he's going to become a police officer.
I vowed then to become a police officer. I since then became a police officer, became a police academy instructor, and trained those cops' children that did that dastardly deed to me.
He knew what it took to be a cop, and then he also had that experience on the other side. So he was able to speak from experience when it came to some of the issues.
We say to the cops that want to come and abuse our people, we will not tolerate it. We speak out against police brutality.
This was really an uncharted water for police officers to come and be vociferous around issues, no matter what the issues were.
James Davis is shooting for a new strategy to stop the violence.
Arnold Schwarzenegger kills a whole lot of people in his movies, but then once the director says cut, you don't see Arnold Schwarzenegger running up and down Hollywood Boulevard shooting people.
He's encouraging consumers and radio stations alike to boycott any artist who gets in trouble with the law.
And he went after and attacked those who involved themselves in any way in gun violence.
Even before becoming a politician, he fought Toys R Us from selling look-alike guns.
Let's get those guns that look like real guns out of these children's hands to prevent these kind of tragedies.
Today, the head of the nation's largest toy store chain bowed to public pressure, announcing that Toys R Us would no longer sell the realistic toy guns that have gotten their owners killed or wounded by panicked police officers who thought the toy guns were real guns.
His rise, his arc, was so noticeable.
I just want to say a little bit more. Is that all right? Is it all right if I get for a little bit further?
You could tell that James Davis was going somewhere.
We cannot expect the police department to respect us if we don't respect ourselves.
The legacy of James Davis centers around his work to stop the violence in his Brooklyn neighborhood.
So he's a person that brings people together of all people in this community, making them who they was, and he will be very, very missed.
James Davis had something special, and so it's particularly tragic for that reason, because you never know where he would have gone.
His face was a recognizable one across the areas of the 35th District. Re-election posters on bus stops spoke of the upcoming Democratic primaries in September, and he already had many votes here.
He was just a real guy, and he just loved to be in the street, and he loved being around people, and it showed. People knew he loved being around them.
I shake his hand right in this corner over here, and I vote for him.
He was, in my opinion, the next generation guy to go. That could have helped change the mainstream. That's why I think that it was so tragic that we lost him and how we lost him.
We have new details tonight about the events leading to the murder of Councilman James Davis yesterday. Reports the shooter claimed Davis was trying to bribe him to keep him out of the next council election.
Here we have this candidate, Othniel Askew. He wants to run against Councilman Davis.
Just 3 hours before the murder, Askew called the local office of the FBI and complained that Davis had threatened to out him as gay if he didn't drop out of the upcoming fall primary race.
Well, Brooklyn politics is a prison yard, and people use their words as shanks, and if you're not careful, you don't know where the shank is coming from in the prison yard of Brooklyn politics.
Othniel Askew was running for the 35th District as a champion of the people, touting education, housing, and senior citizens among his issues.
He was brand new in the community, came out of nowhere, saying that he wanted to run against my brother. He wanted to be an elected official.
Askew filed preliminary paperwork to run against Davis, but missed the July 10th deadline for filing petitions with the Campaign Finance Board.
We have parameters, we have rules, we have policy that you have to follow, you know, if you want to hold political office. And you didn't follow those rules, so you didn't win.
Community activists say after failing to get on the ballot, Askew started showing up at Davis's office and has been doing and saying strange things.
Askew was saying things that were slightly, you could look in hindsight to say there was envious remarks.
I don't know exactly what happened between the two of them, but I know James did have a gift of making individuals feel as though they were special.
Those who work with Davis say it was his nature to trust people and take them on board, even if they started out as his opponent.
If a young person wanted to come up and be a representative or be a public servant, he opened his door.
A Davis staff member says Askew showed up at the office this afternoon, prompting the councilman to invite him to the City Hall session.
Little did Councilman Davis know that this guy held a grudge. He harbored hate.
Killing Councilman Davis, ultimately, in the council chambers, was the closest he was ever going to get to the council.
So he brought him in there. They came in, bypassed the metal detectors.
It appears Askew was also able to bypass the metal detectors because he was brought in by Councilman Davis.
The chilling death march for these two begins in the City Hall steps. It's here that Davis introduces Askew to Councilman Charles Barron.
And I remember Charles Barron said, you know, I met him, but I got an uneasy feeling about him.
And the guy shook my hand, and James saw that I felt strange because he gave me a strange look and a tensive handshake.
And it was just minutes before the shooting happened.
Witnesses say they saw Askew standing over Davis, repeatedly firing shots.
Askew pulls his weapon and he fires several shots onto Davis, hitting him about the body of the torso, killing him.
A New York City police officer was down on the main floor of the council chamber as the shooting took place. He drew his weapon and fired 6 shots up at Askew.
Both men were rushed to Beekman Hospital a few blocks away, but it was too late.
Not only did James lose his life, but the person that took his life is also gone as well. But the reality is there are parts of it that we don't know because their true story is in the ground with them.
The body of slain city councilman James Davis carried into City Hall to lie in state in the building's rotunda.
It's a small token of affection that the city can show, of respect for James Davis.
His mother, Thelma, and Mayor Bloomberg were the first to pay their respects, followed by the who's who of New York politics.
Everybody went to the memorial. Folks came from everywhere. It was huge.
You immediately saw the energy and the spark and the really great confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from having a real sense of what he believed in.
People waited for hours to get inside and just show their respect.
If the line was 2 or 3 blocks farther away, I'd still be on the line.
It was a major, major event and a very sad one.
James was a passionate, dynamic man who will be sorely missed.
Just the thought of it, just thinking about the loss of my brother, not having my role model, my best friend, my hero, just absolutely devastating. For me, personally, but devastating on an entire community.
Realize that you are a chosen people. You are a chosen people.
To know that this man that fought extremely hard to rid his communities of guns actually lost his life by a gun in the chamber where those laws are passed. I think there's nothing more Shakespearean than that.
Councilman Charles Barron says it was painful to see Davis in the rotunda, but his work will go on.
James, I know he's smiling down on us and say, Charles, I did it. I got the world to listen to me.
The discouragement was even James could be a victim. The challenge was, but if we don't keep fighting, we make mockery of his sacrifice.
We will not tolerate anyone disrespecting us, but first we gotta learn and to love and respect ourselves. Love yourself. Love yourself.